happening? Hi, everybody, and welcome to Gen Friends. I'm your host, Cheri Hudson-Passy from Carolina Girl Genealogy. Fabulous panel tonight and a fabulous guest. We've got Melissa Barker, our archive lady. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
Glad you're here. We've got Shelley Murphy, family tree girl.
Hi there. Glad to be here too.
Hi, Shelley. Mary Kircher Roddy's here. Hey, Mary, it's been a while.
It has been too much traveling.
We have missed you. We always miss everybody when they're gone. We are a family, right? Yes.
Yes.
And last but not least on this fabulous panel is Laura Hedcock from Treasure Chest of Memories. Hey, Laura.
Hi, I'm not really sure whether I'm here or not, but
she keeps popping in.
My internet keeps knocking me off. So if I'm here, I'm glad.
You are here. We see you, and everything seems to be working for now. But guys, we have this amazing guest. We have Angela Walton-Raji, and she has come to talk to us. She's got a fabulous new book out, and we're so excited that we've got her on to talk about it. Oklahoma Freedmen of the Five Tribes. This is so exciting, and I know it's just been a labor of love to get this book together. I am so happy for you. So tell us a little bit about how this got started and how you decided this needs to be a book and I need to get these stories out there.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited, yes, to talk about my book, Oklahoma Freedmen. Well, those of you who may know that I have been researching freedmen from Oklahoma for 32 years. As I said, I was a child when I started. Yes, I was much younger. My great grandmother, Sally, some of you have heard me talk about her. And by the way, Sally is the sweet lady in this hat right here.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And she was my great grandmother. I knew her. She was my babysitter until I started kindergarten. And, she was my nana, she was grandmother to a lot of people. And, but she was my great grandmother. She was my father's grandmother. And I was a little girl when she passed away, and she died in the 1960s, 1961. She was born in the middle of the Civil War in 1863. So she was 98 years old when she died.
Wow.
And I was quite surprised. Well, I had always said, now for many years, I lived in New England, I lived in Boston, and I kept saying, I'm going to go to Waltham to the National Archives. I need to go and research Nana's family. I'm going to see if I can find anything, because I know she's from, this is Arkansas and Oklahoma, which is where I grew up. And I knew she was from Oklahoma. She's from the Choctaw Nation. That's no secret at all. But I never made it to Waltham. And so I moved in 1990 to Maryland, so a little bit closer to Washington, D.C., the National Archives.
Exactly.
And I attended, the rest of that story. Well, I attended a genealogy conference in May of that year. And I remember I sat in on a workshop. There was a gentleman from the Library of Congress who was talking about researching Native American ancestors or finding records of Native American ancestors. And I knew that my great-grandmother, Sally, was from the Choctaw Nation. She was part Choctaw herself. And so, I wonder if I can find anything on her. And so I sat in on the workshop, although the presenter at that time for the National Archive, for the Library of Congress, he spent a lot of time talking about Catawba Indians of South Carolina. Well, that wasn't helping me. I'm Oklahoma. Okay.
That helped me.
So I went during question and answer, do you know anything about records from the Choctaw Nation? And he was kind of like, that's Five Civilized Tribes. Oh, that's record group 75. You have to check out the National Archives. I took a note, record group 75, National Archives. The following week, now this was a Saturday I was attending this conference, and the following Friday I took a day off. And I went to the National Archives, and I, asked someone directions. How do I find the records? Where are they? And I was pointed to just a series of drawers and shelves. Oh, just look, there's some rolls from Oklahoma. Take a look. And of course, I'm seeing Cherokee, I'm seeing Choctaw, I'm seeing Chickasaw, and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I'll dive into the Choctaw records. And I pulled out, and this is 32 years ago. The research room was on the 4th floor of the National Archives, and everything was microfilm. Everything.
Oh, yes.
So this was, the world in which I had entered.
Yes.
And so I pulled out something, and I remembered there was something in our family Bible that had her name, had some numbers and letters behind her name, and the letters was CHOC period, FR period. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I did see some reels of microfilm that said Choctaw Freedmen. I'm like, is that what CHOC means? What is that? So anyway, I pulled a reel of microfilm and I started scrolling, and I wasn't seeing anything that looked familiar. I saw a few surnames and I saw a few towns that looked familiar because I know Eastern Oklahoma fairly well. And so I just kept looking. I remember scrolling, and I was in the 600s by this time, just things passing by on the microfilm. You can get dizzy as those.
Oh, yeah. And your arm starts hurting.
Absolutely. And I looked at one file, I'll never forget, it was file number 673. And I saw a name Joe Perry. And I'm thinking, we had an Uncle Joe. Wasn't his name Joe Perry? I wasn't quite sure. And I just kept going. And I always tell people, I am not a person, I'm not a gambling woman. I don't play the numbers and I don't go to casinos, but I must say, when file number 777 popped up, there was my family. And I was like, oh, that's them. What? And then I began to look at the details. There was the name of my great-grandfather, Sam, and Sally, and my Grandpa Sam, and Aunt Louisa, and there was somebody else that I wasn't sure who it was. Uncle Houston. I found out he was an uncle later, but I didn't know Uncle Houston. He had died long before I was born. Anyway, but I kept saying, but that's them. No, it's not. Yes, it is. And, I'm talking now loudly. That's them. I mean, I'm at the microfilm reader in a dark room going, that's them. Well, of course, I printed it off and went home with these sheets of paper. And then I realized, what does this mean? Across from her name, it says slave of Emmeline Perry. What? I knew her. She was a slave. My great-grandmother was not a slave. What do you mean? And her husband, my great-grandfather, slave of Jim Davis. What am I looking at here? And I realized, whoa, something I don't understand is happening. And then I began to look at other reels. I have other images on the reel of microfilm, and I started recognizing surnames. I know triplets, Brewers, Johnsons. Oh, and they live in Spiro. Oh, wait a minute, they live in Poto. I know these towns. And I realized I'm looking at the ancestors of people that I had grown up with these surnames, but I'm seeing a set of records indicating that they'd been enslaved. But at the top, I see Choctaw Nation.
Yeah.
So what the heck am I looking at? And then I remembered I saw something called Cherokee Freedmen. Pulled up a random reel, Cherokee Freedmen, different names, lots of Vans and Rosses. But I started seeing again, Choctaw Cherokee Nation, slave of Chief John Ross. Slave. I'm like, wait a minute. So I realized I've got to go and do some research. I've got to learn what I'm looking at. And I learned that the 5 nations, sometimes referred to as, well, today we call them the 5 tribes, but on paper they were called the 5 Civilized Tribes. And they were slaveholders. And they had brought, during the Trail of Tears, they had brought enslaved people with them.
Yes.
I did not know that.
I think a lot of us didn't know that, right?
Say it again.
I think a lot of us didn't know that.
Most people
we
don't
weren't
know
taught
it
that in school.
because it's never taught.
No.
It is not even taught in Oklahoma.
Oh my goodness.
So imagine I'm sharing this now with people in Oklahoma, and they're saying, what do you mean slaves? What? What? How can this be? And there are literally thousands of records pertaining to people given that classification. I realized, oh my God, I have to write. So I started writing. I wrote my first book in 1993. I updated it in 2007. The year before COVID, no, 2 years before COVID, I started writing another book on just a compilation of family stories that I did. This book came as, I'll just say it was inspired by our dear friend who's not here as yet. I hope she shows up, Bernice. As we know that a year ago, Bernice published a wonderful book, Black Homesteaders of the South.
Yes.
This time last year, Bernice was saying to me, Angela, why don't you do something similar to this? I'm sure History Press would certainly accept it. Yeah, okay, yeah, I know. I was just kind of, putting her off. But the more I thought about it, I said, well, it would be kind of different, particularly because what she did with Black homesteaders, she got people who are descendants of homesteaders to write their stories. Now, many people are familiar with the WPA slave narratives that were taken in the 1930s, 1937, 38, maybe some as late as 39. There was a slave narrative effort that was done also in Oklahoma. The volume on Oklahoma and Texas is part of that project. In addition, the state of Oklahoma, the same time period, initiated their own oral history project called the Indian Pioneer Papers. The Indian Pioneer Papers, there are 128 volumes, and they interviewed everyone who was alive and had a life before statehood. And Oklahoma joined the Union in 1907. So they interviewed people who were Black, who were white, who were Native American, just everybody talk about their lives. And they've interviewed quite a few people who were freedmen from the tribes, the five tribes, the five slaveholding tribes that certainly became part of the forced migration, the Indian removal. We're talking specifically Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Muskogee Creek, and Seminole nations, those five nations. But since the 1930s, that was the last of the oral history initiatives. Well, fast forward 100 or fast forward to, I'll say 90 years, we're dealing now with people like myself and others who've been discovering these records, finding their ancestors. And it finally dawned on me after Bernice kept insisting, there hasn't been any type of first person narrative of people, certainly since, 90 years ago in the 1930s. But we're now at the point we're discovering history that hasn't even been taught. And there were, just to give you an idea of how many people we're talking about, many people know, if you have Oklahoma ancestry, to look on the Dawes Roll. The Dawes Roll consists of 91,000 people, men, women, children, from 5 different tribes. Among the categories of, different tribes, you have the rolls considered by blood, the minors, the intermarried whites, and freedmen. And the roll itself, excuse me, the official name of the final roll, it's called the Final Roll of Citizens and Freedmen of the 5 Civilized Tribes. Of that 91,000, 20,766 people are classified as freedmen.
Wow.
That's a lot of people.
That is a lot of people. Laura,
that's a lot of people to not be mentioned in the state's history.
Exactly.
Could you say the sentence again? Out of how many? Out of
91,000 people on the Dawes Roll. 20,766 people across the 5 tribes are classified as Indian tribal freed people.
That means they were enslaved and became free?
Became freed, or they are the children of those adults who had been enslaved, because some of the children were born in the 1880s or 90s, and the Dawes Roll was constructed in the late 1890s.
So question, this has nothing to do with getting freed after the Civil War?
No and yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Because I'm getting caught here because I know about the 1880 stuff you just mentioned, but wait a minute. Civil War, we got 1865. Okay. Really?
Now, the Civil War ended in 1865. The 13th Amendment abolished the institution of slavery in the United States.
That's right. And they
It
were
did not abolish the
Gotcha.
institute of slavery in the 5 slaveholding tribes.
Got it.
Each of those 5 tribes signed treaties in 1866 with the United States. This is now a year after the Civil War.
Right.
They went to Fort Smith, my hometown, and signed treaties with the United States, agreeing to abolish slavery, to make the formerly enslaved people citizens, and then, of course, to give them voting rights and other things. 4 of the 5 tribes complied with that treaty in the terms of giving citizenship to their formerly enslaved people. The Chickasaw Nation never did, and they do not recognize freed people as citizens. Well, we've never had them as citizens. No, you kind of threw them away once you couldn't enslave them anymore. But the fact is that still, it doesn't matter. The records are there. The genealogical data is there. And that is what's most important. Now, if you've looked at Dawes records before, you have seen enrollment cards, but there's an interview jacket that goes along with it. That interview jacket contains not only the interviews that they underwent in terms of what was asked of them at the Dawes Commission, but sometimes people had to prove, okay, well, if a woman was there and her husband's out of town or he wasn't there, well, are you married to this man? Sometimes you even see marriage certificates, or you see children who were born later that they wanted to add to their family file, so they would bring about birth affidavits. Now, let me give you a time frame. From 1898 to 1914, this process went on. But many people think they were enrolling in the tribe. No, they were already in the tribe. They were already there. They've been there. Many of them had been there since the years of the removal of the Trail of Tears in the 1830s.
Yeah.
Their parents or grandparents had been there. They've been there for decades. And so the purpose of the Dawes Commission was not to enroll anyone in a tribe. They were already in it. The purpose of the Dawes Commission was about land, because part of the treaty that the tribes had to sign in 1866 was not just abolishing slavery. They had to give up half of their lands that they had been given in the 1830s. And they had to do that because that was considered punishment for fighting with the South in the Civil War, which they had done.
I love this.
These tribes had signed an alliance with the Confederate States at the beginning of the war in 1861. And as a result, there are more than 24 Confederate Indian regiments with papers, with documents, with the same files we look at when we look at Civil War. And they had formed all these Confederate regiments. And as punishment for being Confederates and fighting against the United States, if you look at a map of Oklahoma, one half, which is of this, let's say the square in which you see my face, one half they had to give up. And now all these tribes are now forced to the eastern part of the state. This is 1866.
Yeah.
So for the remainder of the century, now these tribes had these tribal governments set up across in these districts, these new districts, that because they had lost the lands to the west, a new territory was formed, Oklahoma Territory, as well as Indian Territory. So, of course, I knew my folks were from Indian Territory. I mean, I grew up there, and that was part of the family lore, the family story. But one of the stories that never survived was the fact that Sally, my dear great-grandmother, had been enslaved. Well, she was born in the middle of the war, so she's 3 years old when the treaties were signed. But what was interesting is that not only did I read the words of my great-grandfather, Sally spoke a little bit, and I was very surprised because she gave the name of her mother, and her mother was also half Choctaw and half Black. And I was surprised to see a Choctaw surname, Ananchatabi. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen that name. My goodness, what? Oh, wow. And just the richness of the data. We're talking about people. The more I began to study the community of freedmen, who were they? What were their lives like? Many of them were, of course, bicultural.
Oh,
Many were bilingual, and Sally was bilingual. Uncle Joe, the man whose card I had seen before I had seen the rest of the family files, he came to visit her once when I was really small. And the family talked about, oh, remember Uncle Joe came to visit Nanny and they were sitting out on the back porch, both of them dipping snuff and smoking a pipe. And like, oh, and they were both speaking Choctaw. They were speaking their mother to each other. So again, it's this rich history, people who are bilingual, people who are bicultural, and some of them were biracial.
yeah.
And not all, but many were. And so again, I realized, but there are 5 tribal communities throughout Oklahoma of people who were freed people living in these nations. So I have devoted the last 30-something years to writing about them.
Yes.
But thanks to Bernice.
I have to tell you though, thanks to that, that's how I learned. I didn't even know any of this, but because of your work.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's true, because of your work. I know about it now.
Wow. Well, I appreciate
I posed a question.
Oh, sorry, Shelley.
If you back up, when you talked about the land, didn't the children also receive land just like the parents? And I'm remembering you saying everybody got land, as far as in the family. So, and we're talking acres. We're not talking lots. We're talking acres. Is that correct?
That is correct. In the Cherokee, the Muskogee Creek, and the Seminole Nation, everyone got equal portions of land. Depending upon which tribe, one tribe, people were given 120 acres each. I think in the Creek Nation, they were given 160 acres each. This is adults, men, women, as well as minor children and babies. Everyone was allotted land. So every one of those 20,766 people, they too were allotted land. In the Choctaw and Chickasaw Nation, there was a difference. The difference being that freed people were given 40 acres each. The mother, the father, and the children, the underage children, as well as the infants. And which, if it's a family of 10, that's still 400 acres, which someone might say, well, that's not too bad.
But why the difference? Why did they get less land?
Well, this is also the other part of that story too.
Okay.
We're talking in Choctaw and Chickasaw Nations, the freedmen got 40 acres. If your name was on the freedman portion of the roll. Remember, the roll is a roll of eligibility for land.
Okay.
If you're on the by blood roll or the intermarried white roll, you got 8 times more land, 320 acres. Wow. And there had been battles.
What rolls if you were on the, what rolls were
the blood roll?
If you're on the blood roll or the roll of intermarried whites, people who had married Native people, you were given 8 times more land than freed people. But the irony is that in many cases, especially among the elders, they knew how to work the land. Yes. They had worked the land for decades. Yes. They had been laborers. This was slavery in the same slavery that you found in Mississippi. This is old plantation slavery. Get on out there and pick the corn or pick the cotton or whatever the cash crop was. And in fact, the nations really, those 2 nations, Choctaw and Chickasaw Nations, really didn't want to give their freedmen any land at all. And the Chickasaws wanted to remove them to another part of the territory. But anyway, that's the way it was. However, there's another part of that story.
Okay.
Indian lands, or lands of intermarried whites as well, those lands were protected. And the lands of freedmen were not protected. They were vulnerable to what are called sometimes land grafters. They were taxed. Indian lands were not taxed.
Oh, wow.
They could not be sold for something like 25 years or some number of years. Whereas freedmen lands were vulnerable. They could be tricked out of land. Somebody would come up there and say, hey, Ms. Johnson, you know, y'all are just some good colored folks, but you know, these taxes, it's hard for people, but you're good folks and we want to help you pay your taxes. Well, thank you, Mr. Smith. You just signed right here, many of whom couldn't read or write.
Oh,
So they would sign, no idea that they had
giving away
signed their land. They had been tricked out of their land. Some you see later on as the century rolled by, statehood in 07, but some you see articles in the 1930s and 40s where the land's being auctioned off because they couldn't keep up with the taxes. So that happened.
Melissa put in the chat that she's got a question.
Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah. I'm like Cheri. I did not know about the Trail of Tears and the fact that the American Indians took slaves with them until you came along. But I love the fact that you emphasize the fact that we should be researching history of, you know, even if you don't have ancestors in what you're talking about, researching the history of the area where they live, researching whatever happened, and, you know, because we weren't taught it in school. And so I always am researching more. I'm actually doing more research seemingly on the area and what happened and things like that than I usually am on my ancestors. But my question to you is that, you know, we have so many genealogists, and those of us on the panel that have been professional genealogists or are professional genealogists. I was a professional genealogist for 19 years. And you'd get those clients that say, I have, you know, Native American ancestry because of the high cheekbones and all these different things that they always say. Or, you know, I think I have
she did it now.
an Indian princess, you know. I even have one of those stories in my husband's family, which I was able to prove not true.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you do have this family lore, what's one of the first or two second steps that you need to take to start that?
I think that you emphasize something very important when you refer to the community. One of the things that I do if I'm giving a sort of a general presentation to individuals who want to know how to research Native ancestry, number one, it is critical that you learn the history and the geography of the region where your ancestors are from. Who are the Native people that lived in the same area where your family lived? If your folks are, you know, from, I don't know what to say, Western Kentucky, but you know that, oh, my folks are full-blood Cherokee. Did full-blood Cherokees live in Western Kentucky or Eastern Missouri? Is that their ancestral homeland? I hear people all the time from the Carolinas. Oh, my folks were Blackfoot. Really? Do you know where the Blackfoot Nation is? Try Browning, Montana, and Southern Alberta in Canada. So it's very important. It does not mean that your ancestors didn't have Native ancestor, but you need to find out who were the Native people who lived there, number one. And sometimes, in addition to that, many people just rely on the looks of a person. You mentioned the cheekbones. You mentioned the hair or the hair length or the hair color. And I always point out, I think every ethnic group on the globe has hair, and many do have straight hair. Many have curly hair, but straight hair that's black is not an indicator of Native ancestry. Oh, but she always braided it into braids. I've seen pictures of people from Eastern Europe. And some of the elders, underneath their little babushka, they have the two braids. Again, it's not a hairstyle. It's not a look. We hear about the high cheekbones, but there's no such thing as low cheekbones. So the fact is that, what are we talking about here? Well, they had that look. Look at them. But there are plenty of people in Eastern Africa with prominent cheekbones, no ties to the Americas. And, you know, a person who is from the Seminole Nation in Florida who has no similar appearance to Inuits in Northern Alaska. So what are we talking about looks? It's not about looks.
No.
And the fact is that particularly if you're talking about looking up the ancestors, and I have it all the time. Well, I know we got this. I have Native American in me. I always find it, it's like, oh, it's like you have a parasite. I got this in me. And it's such a strange thing to hear people say. A lot of it's influenced by Hollywood. Because there's a certain way people think that Native people are supposed to look.
Yep.
I've heard people justify their Native ancestry. Not only did she have 2 long braids, but she pulled herbs from the woods. You know, every group of people on this globe, they have herbs. And people can take nature walks and come back with an armful of herbs. Yeah, but she just had that look. Again, people go back to the look, which is unfortunate. But then there's the other thing. Look at this picture. And see that group picture of the family and that woman over there, the light-skinned lady with the long braids. And well, she could be biracial, black and white. She could be something else. But there's a political issue that some of it comes out of American history, some of which is painful. There are many people of African descent who will say that light-skinned person with the long hair is Native because it's a little bit more comfortable to accept that person as opposed to admitting that that person was fathered perhaps by someone who was white. Likewise, there are white families. Many people are finding they have a little droplet of African ancestry, and they have a portrait, and somebody's a little bit brown skinned. Oh, who is that? Oh, that's our Indian.
Yeah.
You'll find some white families want to avoid association with someone of African descent by claiming that somebody who's a little bit more tan is Native American.
Right.
And then again, well, my grandma wouldn't lie to me. And Shelley knows what I'm going to say. What if somebody lied to grandma?
Yes, exactly.
That can happen.
Right.
And so the most important thing
that grandmothers do lie.
Laura knows. Laura can
grandfathers too.
Well, there you go. And there you've heard it.
There you've heard it. So your book, you've got stories. Is it stories of these people that?
Well, what I decided to do, thanks to Bernice's influence for sure, she got descendants of homesteaders.
Yes.
I decided to see if let's have a 21st century version of family stories, descendants of those 20,766 people from 5 different tribes to tell either their story. It can be a story of how they found this information, how they found it out, because keep in mind, it's not taught. Some people knew some of their ancestors, some people who wrote stories. They actually knew their person on the Dawes roll. Yes. I was fortunate. I knew my Sally. I knew her. I was a little girl. She's my heart. But everybody didn't know their Dawes enrollee. And again, Dawes meaning the Dawes roll, named after the Senator Henry Dawes, who wrote the entire Land Allotment Act, which is why it's named after him. Well, the fact is that many people had stories of their own discovery. One gentleman told a story of his life, how he had been working for years. He studied Native American law. He's from Arkansas, and he studied Native American law. He also became very active in the management of the United Methodist Church. He traveled to all kinds of things, and he ended up conferences. He ended up serving on the Native Affairs Commission to the United Methodist Church. And he said, oh, I met Wilma Mankiller. I met Chief Chad Smith. He knew all these tribal chiefs. He had studied law, Native American history and law. He never knew this is part of his own history.
Oh, wow.
And his chapter is called Discovery of a Studied History. He had studied all this. But when he was born in Kansas, not both of his parents, but he was raised by people on his mother's side, but on his father's side, his father died of tuberculosis before he was 2 years old. So he didn't know his dad and didn't know his father's side of the family until years later. He was already an adult, working professional, teaching, and someone had introduced him to one of his aunts on his father's side. First time he actually met his father's siblings, because he was raised in Western Arkansas, not on the Oklahoma side.
Right.
He went to visit her in Kansas City. And in talking, oh, yes, your dad, oh, you look kind of like him. And, oh, I miss my brother. We're part Indian. Now, this is a guy who studied Native American history. Oh, really? How do you know that? Well, I know that. That's our family. Really? Have you heard of the Dawes Roll? Of course. We have people on the Dawes Roll. What do you know about the Dawes Roll?
Oh, wow.
And so it's like, what? Yes. And so she gave him the name of the family members. It turns out that his ancestor, Easter Powell, to date, is the oldest freedman I have found on the Dawes Roll ever. She was on the roll as 110 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And he never knew this. And he was like, I studied this for years. I didn't know I was connected to this history.
That's amazing.
Another story, a woman wrote, she was a military child, but her parents traveled all different places. And our father would sometimes talk about, maybe we'll have a reunion when we get back. And we can only go so far in our history because, our folks were slaves. Her mother would always say, well, my people weren't slaves. They lived with the Cherokees. And that's all she knew. They lived with the Cherokees. Her mother's from Oklahoma, and they were Cherokees. She didn't know how they were Cherokees, but they were Cherokees. They lived with the Cherokees. She read my book and said, and she lives now in Maryland. And she went to the National Archives after reading my first book, not this book, but she has a story in this book. And she found her folks, and she's spoken to me and told me the story. She said, I had to call my mother. Ma, they didn't live with the Cherokees. They were slaves of the Cherokees.
Oh,
her mother had never heard that story. Her mother, born and raised in Oklahoma, she told her story of how she came to learn about it. Another young man in California, his people were Creek freedmen. And he tells us, so some of them are stories of really discovering how he had grown up in California. And he always felt a little teased. Because he was a little light-skinned little boy with curly hair. And, they say I'm not Black, and they say I'm not white. What are we? And so it's either his aunt or his grandparents said, well, we're Creek. And he didn't understand it at first. He said, we're Greeks? What? And he said, no. Creek Indians. And he was like, trying to process that. What it's a little kid in California. And he had to learn what that meant and had to do research. So several people I have met since 1991 who share this history, but who did not grow up with knowledge of this history. So I said, I put out a query, thanks to Bernice's nudging me in one of my Facebook groups. How many of you would like to share part of your family story in a book that's being considered about Oklahoma freedmen? As a result, I have 25 different writers and 27 different stories. All 5 tribes are represented. And it's been a remarkable process. And I'm just so thrilled that people have have joined this project. And now I have people coming up to me, can I be in volume number 2? I'm like, hey, I'm tired. I need the rest of volume 1. Okay, I don't know if there's going to be a 2, but anyway, you have a question, Laura.
Yeah.
It's not a question, it's a comment. I just love so much that you did include these journeys of discovery. Because I teach a lot about storytelling, I always tell people, you want to give your readers someone to root for. And a lot of times that someone is the family historian.
Yes.
And it's not necessary, especially when we can't delve down and know all the exact details of our ancestors' lives.
Yes.
We stand in for our ancestors because we're on a journey of discovering them. So I applaud that. I think
Thank
it's
you.
great that you're including that.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. And it's really funny, this time last year, as I said, Bernice was just nudging me. You really need to consider, I'm sure History Press would really like this. Oh, you've really got to do this. And finally, around mid to late September, I kind of said, oh, okay. Well, maybe you're right. Maybe I should just try. I said, so who's your contact? She gave me her contact, and I wrote him a note. And he said, this sounds interesting. I'll put you in touch with our Oklahoma guy. I'm thinking, you have a guy? All right. So I was in touch with the Oklahoma guy, and we spoke after he had gotten my initial letter where I introduced myself to him. And he said, this is kind of interesting. So we spoke a little bit more. He asked me if I had an example of some of the stories. I said, well, I can send you something from my blog. I sent something about Sugar George, who's one of my favorite people from the Creek Nation and from Indian Territory. I just happen to love this guy because he's just so fascinating. But anyway, and he was like, you know what? This is not a bad idea. Why don't you fill out our proposal, which is they have a form, an electronic form that you can fill out and go into detail about it. And one of the things they kind of ask you, like, well, who do you perceive as the competition, and just different questions. What makes this book unique? I said, there is no competition because there is no book like this.
There's no book. People don't even know the
There
story.
is no book like this.
Yeah.
The last time someone even spoke to people who had ties to Freedmen was in 1938-39 with the slave narratives. So there is no book written by descendants of all 5 tribes. And there have been issues over the years, political issues. People were still members of the tribe until eventually some of them got kicked out because they decided, oh, we're going to make this a blood-only tribe. And so there have been issues over the last 20-something years with Cherokees, and there's a lawsuit right now with Creeks and Seminoles that kicked the Freedmen out, and then there was a lawsuit and they had to put them back in. So there have been those issues. But from a genealogical perspective, you don't need a lawsuit, you don't need a lawyer, you don't need to go to court. Those records are there.
Yep, they're records.
And they're plentiful.
And now these people are being remembered.
Yes, that's my hope.
That is what's so special about this is, like, as we started, we were talking about, we didn't even know. If it wasn't for you, I would have never known this even existed, even went on.
Oh,
now the individual, now that I know that it happened, now I can read this book and really learn their stories of who these people were. What their lives were like, and things that I never would have known.
You know what's interesting, because these are people who lived on the Western frontier. They're in Oklahoma, and a lot of people think, oh, Oklahoma, bunch of Indians, cowboys, Indians, outlaws, and marshals. Well, the Freedmen were in all of those categories. They were cowboys, they were Indians, they were marshals, and some were outlaws, including one of the ancestors. But that's a different story for a different time. But the fact is that when it comes to Black history out of Oklahoma, there are 3 stories. Oklahoma Black towns, the Tulsa Massacre, 1921, and civil rights, integration of the University of Oklahoma Law School. Those are the only 3 stories you hear. But let's take the oldest, the Black towns. One of the oldest towns, if not the oldest, was established in 1903. But the Choctaws arrived in Indian Territory in 1830, after the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit was signed, bringing enslaved people with them, including my own ancestors. And prior to that, you had the old settlers from the Cherokees who would realize, oh, I think we're going to have to move west. And some of your wealthier Cherokees moved westward way before the Trail of Tears, before the removal, taking enslaved people with them who were clearing the land for them. And yet, Black history starts with the Black towns in 1903, and you have people who were there 8 decades earlier who were documented 20,000 plus, 20,766, whose stories
I think that's being just
are
critically
invisible.
left out.
Completely left out of history.
Left out.
Yeah. This work is so important. I hope there will be a a part 2, but you know, you gotta breathe after
I know. Well, you know what? I consider this book, thanks to Bernice and her nudging me, I consider this sort of, I consider her sort of like a book writer's, she's the midwife who helped deliver this baby.
Oh, yes.
And
that.
I was talking to a colleague today, and after we talked, we had a great conversation. And I said, Bernice, we were talking earlier about you. We call it the Bernice book tree. And you're the root, but here's one of your children that you helped bring. I said, but guess what? There's going to be a new branch on your tree. Because I called a friend today and I said, here's the book you've got to write. You've got to write it. You've got to write it. You've got to write it. And he agreed.
Oh,
And
great.
Shelley, you will like this because it's one of our Maggie instructors. Cheri is about to write a book with History Press, or for History Press,
Oh,
at
wow.
least we hope. And I've got him.
Well, I'm another baby.
Oh,
being
yes.
born.
Yes. And you're
I'm-
another baby too. We can't
I'm
wait to
another
see it.
Bernice and Rick Murphy baby being born. The nudges.
And
I'm
then
writing.
Dr. Mary Clark, who's writing her book, and Oris has a book that's being pitched this week at
This is
History.
wonderful.
Oh,
It's
that's
wonderful.
awesome.
And you know who I really think is pushing? Yes, they're pushing Bernice, but it's the ancestors pushing.
I
They
think
want this-
so too.
They want their stories told. They want to
I
be
think
remembered.
so.
So they'll use whatever channel
Yeah.
they can get to. And right now they're getting to Bernice.
She is the vessel. She is
Bernice,
the vessel.
you get one of those phone calls. How you doing? How you doing? I'm fine.
Yes,
I
yes,
just wanted
yes.
to check in.
You want to write a book?
And I knew. I said, and then a text. I get a text from Rick Murphy. How many pages did you do? Or
That's
how many
great. I
words
love it.
did
Okay,
you
Well,
type?
Shelley, you'll have to tell us what are you working on? Or
Finally
can you tell us? Or can you tell us?
Finally remembered the Black Patriots of Central Virginia.
Gotcha.
Those are the Black
Okay.
Patriots from the Revolutionary
Yes.
War.
Okay. That totally
in
makes
Central
sense for you to be doing that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have
That's
another
beautiful.
unusual question for
Okay.
Angela. I do have an Oklahoma. I actually have 2 Oklahoma connections, but one is personal because I lived there for 7 years. My dad was in the Air Force, so we were in Altus, Oklahoma for 7 years.
Altus. My brother did basic training at Altus.
Yeah,
so
we were there from 1973 to 1980 when my dad retired.
cool. Oh, wow.
Yes, but I have another connection that goes back further than that. My great grandmother actually married her second husband, and they moved to Sapulpa, Oklahoma, which is Creek
Sapulpa.
County.
We
Yes,
say Sapulpa. Yes.
Sapulpa.
Sapulpa.
But they moved there not too long. I'm gonna say within a year of statehood. They owned a store on Main Street. And so my question is this, because I am an avid reader and studier of history, and not only as it relates to genealogy, but I just love reading history. Is there anything that I should be on the lookout for in my ancestors, which they were white, ancestors' records or their story or anything that might connect to what you're talking about?
Let me ask a question. Did they live strictly in the town itself?
Yes.
Okay.
They
And
didn't own a lot of land. They just owned lots in town.
Oh, okay. Okay. Pay attention to the 1900 census.
Okay.
If they were there in 1900, do you know if they were?
I think they came soon after statehood, which was
Oh,
what,
okay.
1907. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was going to say, if they lived in 1900, for some reason, the census enumerators for 1900, even though it was Indian territory, it still is classified as Oklahoma on the census records. They started putting township and range, and I want to get you to some maps.
Yeah.
And however, you should still be able to find some maps. Now, a lot of them are like the old allotment maps, but whenever you see an allotment map that doesn't have anything shaded in, those were lands that were sold to white folks moving in, because the purpose of the Dawes Roll was to allot land to everybody in the tribes, and then the remaining millions of acres to be then opened up for white settlers to come in.
Mhm.
So I would suggest finding, if you can find exactly where they lived in Sapulpa and get a legal description of where they lived, you might be able to find some other things. Now, you'll find some of the maps where they're unshaded. Those are oftentimes towns, and those are where you find town lots on some of those maps. The National Archives does have allotment maps, and so I would say if you can find out the township and range where they were living, you may be able to find some other records such as the BLM site that's going to show you who was original owner of that land, because that land was considered public land after statehood.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can see their names popping up, also look at a site called Acre Value. And I'm talking just strictly land right now. But at the same time, I would also just take a look at some of the old newspapers out of the territory, newspapers.com, and type in some of the ancestors' names, and just to see if their names appeared, because their names might appear in some of those sections where land was being acquired. The fact that your ancestor was a business person in Sapulpa, there may have been his name may appear in some other types of records as well. So that could be very interesting, actually. That'd be interesting to follow
I'll have
up.
to do that. I have to do that. Thank you.
For sure.
I love the part of the map and the allotment maps.
Yes. Oh, they're wonderful.
Yeah. It just amazes me that how all this worked out, that the children also got land.
Yes, babies.
It would, that kind of blew me away when I first learned that from you. And the other thing that I wanted to understand, that I'm wondering if some of that land is still in the family.
Some families
if it's the 40 acres or if it's the 160. Did that, I'm going to say, land wealth continue to today?
Some did, a large number no, but there are some people who will tell you, oh, they're still living on family land. They still are. And now I know that one young lady who comes to our group occasionally, and she said, oh, well, my aunt lives in, I think she said Idabel. And I can tell you exactly, she's still living on family allotted land. Well, that's because, again, somebody lied to grandma, because I went in and found it. And I said, oh, wait a minute, I'm looking at what you're talking about. And she said, oh, and her house is on, she named the street. So I zoomed in on this map, town map, and looked at particularly the township and range on a plat. I said, oh, I see an Addicts Elementary School. Oh, I can tell by the name of that school. That's a Black neighborhood, right? And she said, yeah, she's across the street from this school. I said, well, and she's directly across, right on a corner lot. I said, but that's a lot. That's not, 40-acre allotment. That's a tiny lot. That's not even,
a city lot.
A city lot. And so then, and then the rest of that map was blank. This was like, some of it was timberland or what have you. And I said, this is not allotted land. And so I said, well, let's look up the land allotment jacket. That gives us the legal description. And the legal description of the family was somewhere else. So the family, and so she thought that they were still living on allotted lands, and they were not. And, but I still know families, for example, in Fort Coffee, which is one of the Black towns, in fact, some people who are still living on grandparents' allotted lands. So I do know some who are. Lots and lots of people in some of the Black towns, yes, but a lot of them lost it over the years due to their lands were not protected, and they were tricked, or they couldn't afford the taxes, or what have you. So
I have a last question for you. And I know the Dawes row or Dawes cards, but there's other rows.
Oh, yes.
Is that the different tribes had different rows, or is that the United States that had the different rows, or is that the now state of Oklahoma that had the different rows?
The different tribes had different rows.
Okay.
The Choctaw Nation, for example, if you see an enrollment card and you'll see, maybe say there are 5 people in the household, and it'll say Number one appears on the 1996 roll. Keep in mind, this is the Dawes roll, 1898 to 1914. And it'll say on the card, this person on line number one appears on the 1896 roll as Minerva Johnson instead of Minerva Prince or whatever. Or this person is also found on the 1885 roll, line number such and such, page number 15 or what have you. So you'll see that. In the Cherokee Nation, you have an 1895 roll, but you have the Hester roll, you have the Tompkins roll, and you have the authenticated roll of 1880. Creek Nation, you have the Dunn roll of 1867, and then you have some other rolls as well. So
that's where it comes back to about that community research.
Yes, absolutely, it does.
Or the tribal research, the community. Then I think that's a point. Now I'm getting,
also, one of the things good about a Dawes card, and I should have brought some illustrations with me, and I'm sorry I didn't. You find the post office where they lived, and you find the residents listed where they lived, because there were freedmen communities or clusters of families. And I know Terry Ligon, who's done a lot of research in the Chickasaw Nation among freedmen, he's found in the town of Wynnewood, Oklahoma. It's not a Black town, it's incorporated just town, regular town in Oklahoma. But he's found 90 plus freedmen families who were there. They were there decades before statehood. So, and decades before the Black towns that were founded in the 1900s. 95 families, that's a community. It's a small community, but it's still a community. And
some of them are related.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And but there's so much to find. There's so few people who are really analyzing and creating demographics. It's interesting because last year I attended a Senate hearing on Capitol Hill. They were interviewing tribal leaders from the 5 former slaveholding tribes because they have disenfranchised many of the freedmen descendants. And they asked, I'm trying to think who's the guy sitting on the right. He was from the BIA in terms of how many descendants are we talking about? Because people are still trying to get, a certain rights that they feel that they're being denied. And the guy from the BIA made a statement, well, we don't have a demographic. We don't know how many there are. And so the fact is, no, there is not, because they've sort of ignored freedmen descendants. After statehood, we don't care what tribe you're in. You're still a Negro, get to the back of the bus, because that's the first Senate bill was passed.
Right.
So the thing is that, though, no one is studying it. And that's one reason I studied when I started looking at articles talking about how many people were admitted by classification. I started looking by tribe, and then I said, well, let's add it up. How many were freedmen? And no one has been looking at that. So it's important to really study these communities. And I know Cheri's gone in depth in the Chickasaw freedmen communities. He's finding these clusters of families, 25, 45 families, 90 plus families. And yet the only story of the Black towns in 1900. And it's like, well, wait a minute. There were other people there too. So it's
such an important work that you're doing. It's such an important work.
Thank you. I appreciate
Well, I've got another question.
Okay.
I'm a genealogist, but I'm also an archivist. I work daily in archives for past 12 years. So my question is to you is, I always want to ask everybody who writes a book or does this kind of work, where did you find your records? And did you find any record loss, or did you have trouble with any kind of finding records?
Okay, the majority of the records that launched my first book, certainly, and the second and the third, National Archives. However, these were microfilmed records. The original records are kept at the Federal Record Center in Fort Worth, Texas. And
I've been there.
And it's a fabulous place.
Fabulous.
I went down there several years ago. I was there for another purpose in terms of being in the Fort Worth area. But I went there specifically and spent an afternoon, well, actually a greater part of a day at the archives. And I asked one of the ladies, can you please do me a favor? I know these things are on microfilm. I look at them all the time. Can you please pull out the original Dawes card of my ancestors?
Oh.
She went and climbed up a ladder, and I actually held it in my hand. I don't know myself holding it, but I had this card in my hand.
I love it.
Now that's where a majority of the records are at Fort Worth, but they're all on microfilm around the country. But I found from reading other books pertaining to the history, one wonderful book by Daniel Littlefield that many libraries have it. I hope you have it, Melissa, the Chickasaw Freedmen by Professor Daniel Littlefield. You all should have this book. He makes a reference to a lot of conventions because Chickasaw Freedmen, they were never given citizenship. And he points out after that from 1866 up until statehood, they were literally a people without a country. They were not U.S. citizens. They were not citizens of their own nation. But he also talked about a convention that the Freedmen had in 1898 and in Berwyn. And he, on his footnote, indicated where he had pulled the minutes from that particular convention. They're at archives too in College Park.
Oh my goodness.
So I went, pulled it out. He had the perfect reference point, and I pulled out these minutes from a Freedmen, Choctaw Chickasaw Freedmen convention from 1898. So Archives 2 has a few holdings that Archives 1 doesn't have, and definitely that they don't have in Fort Worth. And so, but that's for the most part, the records have all come from one of the federal repositories. Other repositories, of course, well, still it's Archives 1. Civil War pension files, Civil War pension files. Again, that's still federal. That's still National Archives. So a majority of the unusual original documents came from there. Now, I also have some original documents in my possession that I got off of eBay.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
That's amazing.
I find land records off of eBay all the time. Yes. Yeah. So, and these, some of them are allotment certificates that people gave up or lost the family land, and it pops up in somebody's, collection on eBay. And so I have found a lot.
That's cool.
That's just my own personal thing. It's like, and they're Freedmen records.
Wow.
So yeah.
Well, this has been amazing. Does anybody else have any last questions or anything? I can't wait to get the book and read it. I'm so excited to read these stories. I'm so interested in these people. It's frustrating to me to know that these things were going on and I never learned about it.
I know, and it's still not taught. It's still not taught.
Yeah, it's still not taught. So anybody got anything as we close?
I'm good.
Oh,
my book arrives August 7th. Her book.
Shelley.
Angela's book. That's when I get it, August 7th, according to Amazon.
Okay.
Okay, Shelley, I want to tell you, go onto Amazon to check again, because if there is, look over to the right, because if you see something that says order today and you'll have it by the 8th, that tells me it's already at the repository where your Amazon distributor, is. And you might get it before then, because I was told that Cheri was going to get, because I just did this on the mail because I had some author copies. I mailed him a copy Friday and he just got it today. So some things are arriving earlier. So
that's great. Maybe you'll get it earlier.
I hope you get it before then. So.
Anybody else? Mary, did you have anything? A couple of times I thought maybe you're okay.
It's all new to me. So
so I love learning new things. This has been wonderful. Angela, thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure. It's good to be here. Yes. Thank you.
Have you here. It's so good to have you here, and good luck with the book. And it's amazing. I
appreciate that.
Wonderful work that you've done to remember these people, to teach us about these people that we didn't know anything about. That's what your life work has been. And like I said, because of you, I know that the situation even happened. And so now I want to read these stories. So
thank you so much. And I appreciate it. Remember, Oklahoma Freedmen of the Five Tribes. Thank you all.
We will put the link in so people can go and find it. And your trailer is really good too. There's a trailer.
Oh, you've seen it. Thank you.
The trailer. We'll put the link.
I posted it on LinkedIn today and Facebook.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
All righty. Thanks
All
so
right.
much. And we will see you next time on Gen Friends. And we'll love to hear your comments about what Angela's been talking to us about tonight. And if you've got any stories, hey, let us know. And we can get you in touch
The
with
great stories.
yeah. So yeah, let us
Thank you
know.
so much. I appreciate it. I'm
All
really
right.
honored. This is
Well,
real treat here.
Thank you. And we'll see you next time on Gen Friends.
Sounds great.
Bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.